Welcome to Legends in Leadership, brought to you by ISF and the Carrington Group. Legends in Leadership is an inspirational podcast featuring the stories of leaders who are making a difference. Our goal is to inspire you with the stories of leaders who come from humble beginnings, overcome challenges, and ultimately rise up to make a difference in people's lives.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome to episode number 67 of Legends in Leadership. And look at us. We are live from Real News Communications Network studio, finally, after being out of studio for quite some time. So it's great to be back. I'm a family officer with the Carrington Group. My co-hosts on today's podcast, I've got Jason Smith with me, who's one of my partners at the Carrington Group, and then, of course, the great Dr. Blair Ritchie, who's the Executive Director of the International Student Foundation.
Did I get a promotion while we were going?
Well,
to greatness?
Hey, you continue to bring all this great trivia to the table every week, and so I had to give you a little bit of an extra accolade there. So.
Awesome.
So let's kick off things with a little bit of leadership trivia. We are fascinated, by the way, just so everybody knows, by the stories of leaders who, like us, that come from humble beginnings and then rise up to become leaders of influence in other people's lives. So what do you have for us today, Dr.
This is a good
Blair?
one. This is really...
You'd say they're all good,
I know
though.
they are.
I think he's biased.
It's a gift. Anyhow, today's legendary leader is known for his pen name more so than his real name. He was born on this very day in June in 1903 in India and was given the name Eric Arthur Blair. I kind of like the name, right? The son of a British civil servant, he was raised primarily by his mother, who left his father to return to England when her boy was just a year old. As a boy, our leader was a sickly child who ultimately fell in love with writing. What he lacked in popularity and personality, he made up for in smarts, which some of us have had to do, and the powerful influence of his pen. Like most starving artists, he took all sorts of jobs to make ends meet, including being a dishwasher. Since his first major work was entitled Down and Out in Paris and London, he didn't want to embarrass his family, so he published it under a pseudonym that is now one of the most famous names in literary history. His two most famous books were turned into films and enjoyed tremendous popularity over the years. In one, he dared to poke fun at the powerful Soviet leaders of the Russian Revolution, and in the other, he gave a glimpse of what it might look like if the government controlled every detail of a person's life. And that's all the clues I'm going to give you. Who's the legendary leader? I'll be back at the close of the program with your attempts at a good answer.
Well, we don't have Kyle with us today, so that was the first problem, and I don't have a clue on this one.
Good.
So maybe Melanie will know.
I'll give you another hint if you need it, but Melanie will probably know.
I probably won't.
Probably. Well, I am very excited about our guest today, Melanie Shaffer. Melanie is an expert in diagnosing talent-related pain points that are keeping organizations from achieving their highest potential and then helping design solutions to impact results. I like this. It says that she marries data with proven methodologies to provide leaders clarity on how to attract and hire the best talent, as well as how to develop their current talent to be the most productive. In 2018, she founded a company called Talent Suite with the mission to build stronger, more productive workplaces and people by teaching companies how to align their people strategy with their business strategy. Man, is that
good stuff?
That's huge, right? Melanie is in the Dallas Business Journal's Leadership Trust, which is an elite group of CEOs that contribute thought leadership. She's an engaging speaker and facilitator that focuses on interactive sessions with tangible strategies to deploy. University of Oklahoma grad.
Boomer.
She's a Boomer Sooner. My brother Brad will like that. He's an Oklahoma grad, and she's also a talent optimization certified consultant and a predictive index certified partner and a Gallup certified strength coach. A lot of man, I don't even know what half that means, but I know it's going to be important.
Find out.
That's right. So, Melanie, welcome to the show. Great to have you on with us, and kind of extra special for you to kind of help us kick back off a live show here at Real News. So good to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've been starving for in-person interaction.
We have too, for sure. Well, I know that you have kind of an interesting upbringing, an interesting story that really inspired you to pursue what you're doing today. So rewind the tape a little bit for us, and let's kind of go back to your earlier days and tell us that story a little bit about your journey and path to doing what you're doing now.
Okay. Well, I'll go back to my days of yore. I grew up in a very rural area of Oklahoma. And,
where at?
Sulphur, Oklahoma.
Sulphur, okay.
Yeah.
What part of Oklahoma is that in?
Oh, gosh. So now you're going to make me do geography. So it is close to the Arbuckle Mountains.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. There's a youth camp close to there called Falls Creek.
Okay, yeah.
Davis, Arbuckle Lake, Arbuckle Mountains.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of that
Beautiful
area.
area.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
And in a small town, it was, interesting because I grew up with a lot of poverty. We were in the highest percentage of welfare in the entire state of Oklahoma.
Wow.
So I knew from a young age, I was blessed with parents that cared and encouraged me, but, it was kind of difficult culturally because I always felt like I was an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, I just so strongly identified with that because I knew from a young age that I really wanted to do something impactful in the world. And so from the age of 12, I was looking for work. I started working. I started babysitting. I started offering to tutor. The best place to work in town was a local pizza parlor. And I started going in there when I was 15 and talking to the owner and saying, I'm going to be here when I'm 16 and you're going to give me a job. And, he was just like, you're crazy. So I've just always had that natural drive. And I was told by a lot of people when I chose to go, and you guys will think this is strange living in Dallas, Texas, but I was told I wouldn't succeed at OU. Yeah, I was told that, it was too big and, I would be back. And that was tough to hear, but I'm also like a challenger. So I'm like, oh, you watch me. You watch me.
Yeah.
And so, to many people, OU is just a public school, but to me it was a big deal to prove that I could get out of that environment and flourish somewhere on my own with independence. And so I ended up in public accounting, and it was not a fit for me, but I love the people piece of it.
Yeah.
And I went and kind of fell into recruiting because one of my friends recruited me to go into recruiting from public accounting. So I've spent a very long portion of my career, almost 18 years, I hate saying that because it dates me, doing recruiting and really trying to broker between, two sets of desires and always trying to understand, with people I was helping in their searches, how can I put them in the right seat, but also with a lot of the executives that we're hiring, educating them on the gap many times between what they wanted and what the right fit actually was. And I did that the whole time, mainly through just intuition, curiosity, asking questions, much like the three of you are very good at. And I just got to a point where I was like, I want more data. I want something objective to remove the bias that just seeps into this entire process. And when I turned 40, I was like, you know what? I am just going to start a company doing that. I want to help prevent these issues that I have spent the last 18 years navigating without a proven solution. So that's how I founded Talent Suite. And I was very fortunate that Brett Lawson, who was the founder of the CFO Suite, which was really kind of my intermediary step between a large public company agency and really getting to do what you guys do and get in and work with mid-market business owners. And when I got a taste of that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can really make an impact here and help these people. And I'm getting to work directly with the decision makers. And I just wondered where that had been my whole life, and just lit me up. So we use something called predictive index in that organization that helped us to, as a business, place in the Dallas 100 fastest growing companies 2 years in a row, because we really figured out like how to hire the right people, how to inspire them, how to lead them. And I went to Predictive Index and said, hey, how can I become a partner with you?
Yeah.
And started Talent Suite. So Brett Lawson was a big influence in that.
Yeah. So much to explore there. My goodness.
I know, sorry.
No.
I tend to, my story is very long, so that was the brief version.
No, it's great. And there really is. There's so much that I want to dive into a little bit later in the show. But I want to hear a little bit about just the things that you've learned as a leader that led you up to Talent Suite. You actually said in some information I was reading that your two core values are excellence and collaboration. And so you talked about the filters that you use with both work and family and your friends. So talk a little bit about that. Where is excellent and collaboration? How do those two things tie together in these different relationships, and how have those become the two core values that have really centered you as a leader?
Yeah, what a great question. So it took me a long time to come up with those core values. I think, you spend a lot of your life doing, and then you get to a certain age where you start reflecting and going, what am I going to leave behind, right? And I think it's when I really started reflecting on where I'd had success and where I had empowered others. Those were the two commonalities that existed in productive relationships and productive endeavors. So, in my Strengths Finder, which is the Gallup that you mentioned, I have one called Maximizer, and I have one called Achiever in my top 5. And so I really enjoy taking things that are already functioning and making them world class. That's my sweet spot. And I'm like that even in relationships. I mean, I talk to my therapist about the fact that I sometimes expect too much excellence in relationships, but it's so important to me. I have to sometimes even step back from a filter of excellence and look at their eyes and say, but is what I'm giving them excellent for them? So I feel like I can center it around not just myself and my values, but am I treating other people at the level of excellence that they deserve? So that's how I apply it with all of my relationships. And then collaboration is in Predictive Index that I work in. My highest need is social acceptance. And I just so enjoy learning from others. Like, I feel like I am who I am because I'm a sponge that values everyone's input. I believe there's always a nugget you can get from every person you meet if you just ask the right questions and listen. So collaboration is literally the essence of me. So, I mean, I'm probably like too animated right now because I'm so excited to be collaborating with y'all right now.
Yeah.
And there's that like additional high when something you learn from someone else, you can then pass on to another person, and just to tie those things together and see that, wow, if not for me listening to not only the person that could teach me something, but then listen to the person and really understand their needs, like to be that bridge is just such a fascinating and fun place to be.
That's such a great observation. It's been really fun in building this business, really elevating the people that work with me and seeing the things that they're able to do by just really trusting that they are ready to step into it. And I've had to learn that because in my prior career, especially a lot in recruiting, you're really rewarded on your own production because I was always on the agency side. It's never internal. So undoing that mentality when I made the transition to CFO Suite, when I started leading people, took me a while because I had at that point 12 years of ingrainment of really self-preservation.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody always has their kind of crossroads in their journey, like the moment that they, the kind of aha in their life. But who who do you think of when you think of the folks in your life that maybe had the greatest influence on you, or maybe caused you to take a different turn in your journey that has now led you to where you are today?
I've been fortunate for so many because I am so collaborative. No. Probably my husband tells me I'm annoyingly collaborative. Okay, so
get her done.
You know, I had one early, which Blair, I love what you're doing. When I was in college, that really kind of plucked me out of a program and was very honest with me and said, you know, I see so much potential in you, but you're a little raw. I want to work with you. I want to help you with your kind of professional presence and, you know, coming from a small town, I just needed some help. And I'll never forget, his name was William Otis. He was an amazing human, and he was the first person that I would call a potential expander in my life that gave me the courage to continue the journey and put myself out there for some things that I don't think without his encouragement I would have done, because I just didn't have a lot of confidence. And I've been fortunate along the way. I mentioned when I was in public accounting, I had this wonderful manager that was really lenient with me at a time. I had an illness that took my hearing in my right ear, and I was off work for a long time. And when I came back, he, instead of the project I worked on, I didn't do a very good job. I still didn't feel very well. And he gave me so much grace and pulled me aside and had a really, you know, just heart-to-heart conversation. I'm not going to put this in your performance review, but if you go into another, you know, engagement with this performance, you know, it's going to impact your career here. And it was like the wake-up call I needed. Like, it was so honest, and I learned a lot from that. And then I mentioned Brett Lawson, who was the founder of CFO Suite, which is when I left the publicly traded recruiting firm and went to go work at CFO Suite. He had founded it. And, you know, I will never forget, 1 year in, we're sitting together, and, you know, he pushes something towards me, and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, it's the distribution of profits for what you did for the company. And I'm just like, no, I don't deserve that. Like, I've already been paid. And he was like, no, I want you to have it. And so that was the first time I experienced, like, you know, others before self and generosity, because he didn't have to do that for me. I wouldn't have left. I was happy.
Sure.
And then he invited me to buy into the partnership. And at first I said no, because I felt like, well, I don't know if I can do that, you know? And I don't know, you guys know Jeff Whittle.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've met him, and he's been the biggest supporter of me, as well as challenging me with, why not, Melanie? Why don't you deserve that? Because, you know, women are more prone to think, if we haven't already done all the things we're being asked, to really put ourselves out there.
Yep.
So I've had some wonderful people in my life that have been, and women too, very strong women that have been supporters and encouragers.
I love you say that we specialize in data, not drama. And I have to tell you, as I looked at that preparing for the show, I started laughing, because there oftentimes is so much drama in the workplace.
Drama.
And so I'm curious about that, because, you know, everybody at this table, we've either helped somebody hire and fire. We've hired and fired our own staff. We work with a lot of business owners and growing companies, and there's so many different methodologies about how to make sure you put the right people in the right seats in the bus and all of that. But what I took away from that quote is that it really is about the data. So walk me through that. I mean, is it that we oftentimes see business owners have just the wrong people in the wrong roles, or is it that we're hiring the wrong people? What do you see more of, and how do you guide business owners to make sure that they are in fact getting the right people in the right seats on the bus?
It's a really big question.
It is, and I can't wait to hear the answer. So,
okay, let me peel back that onion. So, first of all, I believe that every person comes to work with the intention of doing the best job they can. That's the way I have to see the world to do the work that I do. So, the two biggest problems that I see, and we work with a lot of mid-market clients, like you said, it's good person, wrong seat. Or it's an issue with leadership. And oftentimes it's a blind spot. They're not willing to acknowledge, or maybe they just haven't had the right person to challenge them and ask the right questions to understand. But we spend a lot of time doing intake when we sit down with a client to really understand globally like what they're trying to accomplish. And we work within a framework that we call talent optimization. You mentioned I'm talent optimization certified. Mm-hmm. And that model, in context, we want to know business strategy, and then we want to know how are you measuring results. So the things you guys do, right?
Right.
We come in the middle of you, in the middle of that in 4 ways. We help them think about how they're designing their talent structure in alignment with their business strategy. So there has to be a context to that. We help them think about how they're hiring, and not just externally bringing into the organization, but looking with data inside the organization at where are the hidden gems, where are the people like the Melanie Shaffers of the world that don't have that encouragement, that would step up if you could show them the data that aligns with the benchmark for the role, right? And then how do you inspire them to greatness? How do you develop them? Because, research shows that less than 10% of the population is naturally wired to be an excellent leader. Less than 20% are wired to be a good leader. So that means 80% of us with no coaching, no training, are not going to be effective in our leadership. So that really peels back to kind of say it's 2 big problems: good person, wrong seat, or ineffective leadership.
What makes a good leader?
I wrote that down because I knew that when I was here, I would give 10 qualities. So I wanted to boil it down. And so I came up with 4 that really kind of encapsulate. And this is part of some content we're working on right now as well. So the first and most important one is courage. Because everything I do with data, you have to be willing to do something about what we learn. And I have that conversation up front with clients. There have to be guiding principles in how we work with people. And in companies, there have to be 3 things present in the leadership. There has to be at least one executive sponsor bought in and leading what we're doing. There has to be the belief that people can get better. And there has to be, everyone has to participate, but not everyone has to do it first. So that takes courage. It takes courage to build self-awareness and really explore those blind spots, explore those areas where you're not strong, and be vulnerable and willing to share that with others.
I mean, courage, wow. You got to have a lot of courage right now in this day and age, especially on this topic. I mean, a lot of very tough decisions have been made in the last 90 days and continue to have to be made. So just huge there as well.
I agree. And what's amazing in thinking about courage and understanding, our space for great is there was a study done by Tasha Urich in HBR, and she researched with 5,000 people all these parameters for self-awareness, which is described as awareness of our own drives, needs, and behaviors, but also how we land on others, how that affects others. So out of the people surveyed, 95% of people thought they were self-aware. I would love to hear you guess how many actually were.
I'd say less than 10%.
It's pretty close. 15.
Wow.
15% were actually self-aware. So that's part of my passion in helping build courage. So you asked, so I'll go through the 4. It was courage, which also allows for transparency. Because if you're willing to have courageous conversations, then you're willing to take off the armor, like Dr. Brené Brown talks about, and truly be transparent with what you need from others and where you might be having struggles. People want to know that. And then that leads into the second C of compassion. So, listening to others and truly hearing them, practicing mindful practices and empathy. Easier said than done, especially right now in this hectic time where everybody is literally in triage. This compassion piece is really difficult for leaders to really put themselves in the shoes of their team and what they need, because not everyone's comfortable voicing it and they're not physically visible to see. I mean, I was with the leadership group yesterday and people cried in the training that we were doing because we talked about empathy. And people were literally, I was shocked on a Zoom. So that made me just want to reach out and hug them.
Yeah.
And one of my clients got a call from one of his employees. His wife tested positive for COVID, and the employee called with the intention of trying to save his job. And so there's just this expectation of very little empathy or grace. And, my client, he's like, well, no, how is your wife? Is your child okay? And just took the very human approach to it. But he shared with me, he was just so surprised that someone would be that afraid of losing their job in that scenario when, the health of your family doesn't even come first in that conversation with your boss.
Yeah, I think there's
It's a scary time.
It's certainly, this is probably going to be the most interesting from a timing perspective podcast I'll ever get to do.
No doubt.
Being the first one back. But just to wrap up the question, humility is the other one. Is I love what he did. I mean, that is humble, and that is it's really looking in the mirror at yourself and your own reactions to what happens with your people, and then discipline. And everyone has a struggle in these 4 tenets. That one is mine, because discipline's all about consistency and structure and accountability, and that's my Achilles heel. Yeah. That is what that's why I'm in a Vistage group. That's why I have to have people around me telling me and questioning me, like being scared to show up, not having done the things I committed to.
I laugh when I hear about discipline in this time. You hear all the big corporations saying, "Oh my gosh, we don't even need office buildings anymore. Everybody can just work from home." And I still have not been convinced that is the answer, because it is amazing as we've started back in our roles over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Just the level of, I guess you could say it's the human element, just the level of excitement, and people just their game has gone to a new level because we're all together again. So you can try to substitute it all with video, you can try to do all that, but there is something to say about everybody gathering together in this collaborative way to work at trying to achieve this unified goal that we have together. And you just can't do that, in my opinion, as effectively through electronics. So just kind of interesting as you think about disciplines, because it's easy when you're working from home to be very undisciplined, to get out of your weekly routines, to get away from the things that were making you successful. So I think discipline might be one of the biggest kind of hot buttons right now. Is
absolutely.
How disciplined have we really been? Yeah. So
I'm curious, when you talk about the intersection of data and the people, what type of data is it that you're collecting in order to advise in a more objective manner about the subjective? Yeah.
So we're all about measuring what matters. And so we always start with an intention session. And in an ideal world, if the leadership is courageous, being able to collect 360s and really understand, meet the people where they are, what do they need more of. And then predictive index is data in itself, because when we work with our clients and they go onto the platform, because it is a software, we collect the data on the entire employee base right from the onset, so that we can have a leadership session to really dig into what we're seeing and help them to start immediately solving some business problems, thinking about alignment, creating job benchmarks, and really even thinking about like succession planning and pipelining, because a lot of these founder-owned businesses, they haven't thought about where they're going necessarily the next 10 years from now and how they're going to exit. And so a lot of the conversation we also drive is around that strategy. And let's look at the people in your organization holistically. We apply the data from a filter of head, heart, and briefcase. So the data is understanding the drives, needs, and behaviors. And it's all about understanding how to feed someone's needs.
Okay.
That is really the gold that is unique only to PI, because I have looked at so many instruments out there. There's over 800 of them.
Oh my gosh.
As a business owner, I was evaluating them for our own organization prior to this. So the heart piece, you treat through development. You treat through enabling and empowering, right? And so we teach leaders how to apply this data, but we also do leadership development training that is customized to pair with the data of PI. So it becomes cultural the way we implement it because it becomes part of the language. We create accountability groups, we create cohorts, and we can work with companies in different ways. Some companies are not ready for all of that right off the bat.
Sure.
So maybe we just work in predictive index with the leadership team and really kind of help them to start putting rigor around how they're bringing people into the organization and inspiring the ones that are there, and really redesigning even some teams and workflows that really are more suited to how people are wired. But a lot of those founder-led businesses hired people that they knew or were family. And so the problem that you find is they get to a certain inflection point where those people are not the ones that are going to get them to the next stage. And so it's a lot of really courageous conversations that we have to have. And it's so fun, though, if they're willing to go there.
Can you give us maybe just a breakthrough story of an example of where you and your team kind of came in and it was just enabled a breakthrough?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. So one that was most recently was a tech company, and founder-led, still founder-owned, and he hired a president. And I happened to be friends with the president. And it was fascinating that the founder learned a lot from the president in the fact that he was kind of ready to step away from the day-to-day of the business, and he'd had a really hard time letting go of it, which was in his data. The president convinced him to implement predictive index because they needed to make some key hires, and he really believed he was a prior CFO, so he believed in having data to make those hires. And when we did the leadership session to implement it, one of the officers in the organization had a breakthrough that the work I've been doing doesn't align to what I'm wired to do. And that's why, even though I'm here because I have a passion for this business and I've been here for 20 years, this isn't the right seat for me. And so just from those 2 days, he was able to reallocate his energy into going on sales meetings. That's what he loved. He wanted to help the salespeople, and then it was...
we love those people.
You gotta love those people,
get
right?
Out there. We get out there and do some business development. We like that.
And it was just, what was also so cool from a courage standpoint was the rest of the team, it gave them carte blanche in this session to go, and you know what? You would be so much better doing that, right?
Absolutely.
It's what you've been doing.
I'll have your job description tomorrow. As a matter of fact.
No more eggshells. Yeah.
But everybody was able to just be confidently vulnerable with each other in that situation. They also, the other huge breakthrough for them in productivity was they realized that there was one person in their meetings that was showing up without really prepared agenda. And we had a lot of people in that room that liked structure, in a tech company, that's not surprising, right? And it was an aha moment for that person that other people needed that.
Yeah.
Because that's not what that person needed. So they've changed their cadences of their meetings. They called me like the next week and were like, oh my gosh, we've had meetings all week that we get things done.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so, oh my gosh.
I mean, how much have we heard it lately? Oh my, I'm on a dozen Zoom calls every day and we're not getting anything done. I mean, and so many friends that I'm talking to and so many big businesses and industries are just going, it's killing us. Like, we want to go back to work because I feel like we're having Zoom calls because they need to fill up our days, and that's the way it is. Quickly, as we wrap up the show today, believe it or not, these 30-minute episodes, they go quickly. But there was something I wanted to ask you earlier. I was having a debate the other day with one of my mentors as to the best comp structure for employees. Is it base and bonus? And I really am curious as to what you see in various industries, because you were talking at the very beginning of the show about that influence in your life that passed across the table, this surprise compensation to you. So what are you seeing that works the best in modern America today when it comes to comp?
Well, it definitely depends on the role. Definitely depends on the ownership structure of the company. I think it's really difficult when there's not a bonus component. When I was in recruiting, I had companies, or when there's a bonus that's so small that people almost view it as insulting.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like one paycheck, no, not enough. The Christmas bonus, not enough. So I feel like a bonus needs to be in place when I've seen companies that have had success retaining people. minimum is 10%, even on an individual contributor level. But of course, I know people that specialize in deferred comp, and I'm sure you guys do too, and all of those areas. And I think in the question you asked, probably the most significant thing that I have thought about and that I'm seeing companies do a better job of is really putting golden handcuffs and retention packages in place right now, because talent is going to be able to go anywhere as a result of this. So it's going to shift. It's going to be interesting from hiring to retention. And so anything you can do to build things that are long-term incentives into your compensation structure right now and be hyper-vigilant about how you're communicating the upside of it, that people are really clear and it's really tangible. The worst compensation structures in that format I've seen are ones that are just too difficult to understand.
Sure.
Because if you think about the kind of people that are motivated by a long-term retention structure, they're typically risk profiles. So I want to know if I'm a risk taker very simply, very clearly, because I'm not a big data point person as far as making decisions if I'm a risk taker, right? I'm just going to go do it. If you're trying to retain me and keep me from pursuing the next opportunity, I need to have clarity around what my upside is.
Gotcha.
Great answer. That is terrific. Well,
And is there a generational breakdown that you're finding, between, I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't say the word millennial at least once when talking to someone in your space, right?
you had to do that. Thanks, Jason.
I did. But do you see any correlation, or is it mostly about understanding each individual as an individual?
I think it's more of the latter of what you said. I have noticed that generation is just a lot more incentivized by what they're learning, what skills they're developing, and how they're accepted and viewed.
Okay.
They want to be known, and they want to know their leader. And I think that's really hard when you get to boomers that, you don't talk about yourself in the workplace outside of what you do. The leaders that are willing to own that and talk about transparently what they stand for and, be very vulnerable about what's difficult for them, those companies are going to have a higher rate of retention than the ones that throw money at people. I mean, I've been in recruiting forever. Money is hardly ever the reason people leave jobs.
Yeah.
That's the answer. That was where I was trying to get right there. Is it really about that, or is it really about the culture and getting the right people on the right seats on the bus
And
under
what
the appropriate
compensation
leadership?
communicates
Yeah,
about the value of that person.
Yeah. Well, Melanie, this has been a blast and such incredible insight for our business owners and leaders that are listening on the show today. As we wrap up, we always have to go to Dr. Blair to find out.
We need to give her a chance to tell how to stay in touch with her.
Yeah. Tell us about how to stay in touch with you. Good point. I feel like we've talked so much about Talent Suite today. That is a great point. But how do folks get in touch with you? And if they're hearing something that say, that is really the help that we need to advance our organization, how do they get a hold of Melanie?
Well, we're on LinkedIn for Talent Suite LLC, and Melanie Shaffer is spelled SHAFFER on LinkedIn. We're at talentsuitellc.com. And do I give out my phone number?
No. I would not do that.
All right.
They'll find you.
We scratched where people are itching today. I mean, there's going to be a high degree of interest in because this is so real. This is just
thank
real
you.
good stuff.
I'm so thankful that you guys allowed me to be part of this. You guys are really great at what you do.
Yeah, I got introduced to Melanie from one of our previous guests and good friends, Mr. Bart McCollum. So,
So we love Bart.
We love Bart. So,
oh gosh.
Yeah, Bart also sits on the board of ISF as well. So,
I didn't know that was the connection.
Yeah. So, great connection there. Dr. Blair,
All right, guys,
who is it? Can you remind me again? Give us
Couple
the
clues.
clues.
Just a couple
Okay,
clues.
couple clues. A writer. You've read probably somewhere in your educational journey his writings, and his last name is actually used as an adjective of a state that's kind of very controlled. And I read an article this morning that used his last name as an adjective. That's how primitive it is. And I'll just his best known work has a year in it. Good.
Big Brother?
No. Well,
You have led me astray.
Oh.
I'm like,
Well,
I'm
1984
stumped.
was written
Yeah,
by
Orwell.
George Orwell. And
Oh.
Orwellian. I read an article this morning about something was being Orwellian. I thought, you know,
Yeah.
you don't even know much about it. That's our leader today. He was not really popular outside of his pen, but we influence people in many ways as leaders, don't we?
Absolutely.
And some of the best ways is in our writings. So George Orwell is today's legendary leader.
Well, thanks, Dr. Blair. Folks, that is a wrap for episode number 67 on behalf of the Carrington Group, the International Student Foundation, of course, our special guest, Melanie Shaffer. We want to wish you a good day. And we always like to leave you with this, that if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader. Have a great week.
Legends in Leadership is brought to you by the Carrington Group. Carrington Group is a family office with a passion for helping business leaders and their families make smart choices and fulfill their highest aspirations. To learn more about the Carrington Group, visit their website at www.carringtonfo.com or Google Carrington Group Dallas, Texas. ISF is committed to leadership development for aged-out foster care and orphaned youth. ISF's mission is to transform these youth into tomorrow's leaders with scholarships, mentoring, and leadership training. To learn more about ISF, visit their website at isfsite.org or Google International Student Foundation to learn more.
Securities offered through Regulus Advisors, LLC. Member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Regal Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors are affiliated entities. Carrington Group and this broadcast are independent of Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors.